one of the executives, top executives in the company said to me, we won't do a good job of onboarding you. We just won't. And it is what it is. But let's just get you in here and have you working. It was like sort of every cliche you saw in a movie. And you're like, no, these things don't really happen. Like they don't steal your red stapler. These things don't really happen. Right. But it was every cliche you could imagine. And I just thought it can't really be like that. And then it really was. So yeah, when they tell you who they tell you who they are.
Hello and welcome to Growing Through It, your go-to podcast for real leadership stories. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. In every episode, you'll hear straight talk from leaders who face their own challenges. We'll dive into those whoops moments and the insights that followed. This podcast is about the lessons that refine us, shared to help you confidently lead in your own style. Whether you're looking to steer your team towards success or just seeking a spark of inspiration, you're in the right place. Let's grow through it together. Carolyn, welcome to the Growing Through It podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, it's nice to have a friend here. And, I know you and I can ask you some deeper questions maybe, but don't want to scare you that way. All right, Carolyn, for the audience, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm Carolyn Sorgenfrei. I have spent about 20 years in the employee experience space, whether that be physical workplace or building employee programs, events, company policies around volunteerism, those sorts of things. Really, whatever it takes to make work better, that's what I'm passionate about. And that's where I've really focused my career over the last 2 decades. Let's not admit that out loud.
I know, right? When you say, I've been in it for 20 years, it feels like you should be like 80 years old, but no.
Yeah, I started my as a supervisors and that sort of thing in retail, and I worked my way through gaming and did HR management and leadership there, and then went into tour directing, which was sort of the dream career that you don't think you really get to do. And even that was still managing the experience, right? But it's a guest experience at that point, but it's very similar sort of philosophies. And then I went back to the working world and just, continued to do what I do, which is drive that experience for people.
Yeah. And so many companies do think about the customer experience, right? Or if you're in a hospital, the patient experience, but the employee experience is really what drives all of that. We don't talk about it enough. So you recently led a session at our Culture First chapter event about onboarding. So let's talk about onboarding and why does a positive onboarding experience matter? This seems like kind of like a no-duh situation. Like we all know it matters, but you actually have some stats behind it and can bring your expertise.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, though. Onboarding matters, right? It's that first impression, and it really is building a long-term relationship between the new hire employee and the company overall. And companies that have effective employee-centric onboarding have nearly 2 times greater profits in the long run. So it's not just about building this moment of connection on day one, but really the health of the company overall really depends on setting up that positive relationship and setting your team up for success from day one. Really before day one, because I would say interviews is part of that onboarding process. A lot of times OBGYNs will sort of say that the first 3 months of a baby's life is that 4th trimester where they're still sort of becoming a baby, right? They're not quite babyish those first 3 months. All they do is sort of eat and sleep. And I would say it's sort of similar with an employee. Those first 90 days, they may be on probation with the company, but guess what, company? You're on probation too. And the employee is deciding if they want to be there long-term in those first 90 days as well. And so it really is sort of, going from this outside person to this someone who's in the company in those 90 days is a huge transition, just like it is for a newborn in those first 90 days. And so it really is everybody's trying things out and figuring it out from that get-go with the onboarding.
Like a really long first date, right?
Yeah, really so. Long first date. Yeah, but you're looking to like build good habits, reinforce behaviors, all that stuff really matters. If you don't set the tone right away, it's going to affect you in the long run.
Right. Well, when you really look back in your 20 years of experience, what was your worst onboarding experience when you started? You don't need to name the company, obviously, but
right. Yes. I wish I was telling you a story from like 1998, but I'm not. I'm telling you a story from a somewhat recent time frame. But there was a company that I interacted with and ended up working for a short time that I went through 7 interviews, 5 conversations with the recruiter, and a 3-hour assessment before I walked into this position. And there were red flags all along the way, but I talked myself out of it. Oh, you're just looking for trouble. Oh, maybe it's not as bad. Maybe you misconstrued what they said. And I'm here to tell you, if there are red flags, there are red flags. Run.
Run away. Listen to yourself, right? Because I actually remember you going through that. And you said there's a red flag here. There's a red flag here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. At
what?
one point, one of the executives, top executives in the company said to me, we won't do a good job of onboarding you. We just won't. And it is what it is. But let's just get you in here and have you working. I should have ran right then and there, but I didn't. He wasn't kidding. They weren't going to do a good job.
And they did not. Confirmed. Like, I'm curious, like, why did you ignore the red flags? Were you just like thinking like it can't possibly be this bad?
Yeah, it was like sort of every cliche you saw in a movie, and you're like, no, these things don't really happen. Like, they don't steal your red stapler. These things don't really happen, right? But it was every cliche you could imagine. And I just thought it can't really be like that. And then it really was. So, yeah, when they tell you who they are, they tell you who they are.
Right.
On paper, everything was right. So, like, there were KPIs to find. There was a 30, 60, 90-day goal. There was an onboarding buddy. There was an invite for a team lunch on day one. Orientation sessions on the calendar. It felt like everything was right. And then when you start deep diving, it just wasn't. Those 30, 60, 90-day goals that were in my email were different than the ones that were in Confluence, and were different than the ones that were in Bamboo, or Lattice rather. And so I didn't really know which goals to even work on. When I asked my manager, they're like, oh, as long as you're making progress every week, it's fine. Progress on what? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. The onboarding buddy, didn't really, they had a beautiful document they typed up, but no real plan to like sit with me and execute on it and explain things. So there was just this pretty document with yet more goals that I didn't know how to achieve or do. The lunch on day one with the team, we all sat at the same table, and my manager sat right beside me and then turned her back to me and talked to everybody else at the table. And no one at the table asked me a question, tried to get to know me. I wasn't really sure why I was there. Like, it was a very uncomfortable lunch. And then, like, our KPIs were not SMART goals. It was like, reduce the budget by 10%, but don't change the experience. What budget? Where am I starting from? How do I find this information? What experience am I not changing? What are you using to measure it so I know if it's being changed or not? And the answers I got after, days of trying to track it down was, well, I don't know. Have you met so-and-so? Go find them. They'll probably know. How about introduce me to so-and-so? Make that connection. Tell us what we need to be working on together. Like, just
Wow.
one thing or another.
So it is interesting that you say that. There was such a, on paper, it looked good. Like, that sounds like a solid onboarding program, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you look under the hood, it's like, no, this is not good. Nothing's aligning. I don't know where my goals are. That sounds like quite an experience. And I'm hoping in 20 years you've had a really good onboarding experience.
Yes, absolutely. I've been fortunate actually to experience good onboarding way more times than bad. But my favorite experience probably goes back to my gaming days. They really had it, the whole process dialed in. There were only 2 interviews. My offer letter came shortly after the second interview. And in that offer letter, not only did it say my salary and benefits available to me, PTO, all of those things that you're wanting to know as you make your decision, but it also went into a little bit about what day one will look like. Like, there will be a 2-day orientation. You'll meet with your manager after that. And so I sort of had I knew what I was jumping into right away. I accepted the offer, and after that got, again, more information. It was 2 full days of orientation that included icebreaker games and information about the company and all employee programs, all the sort of standard things that you want someone to know coming in on day one. But then there were also guest speakers from senior leadership who came in and said, here's my role, here's what I do, and here's how your role helps my team. And here's how my team helps the overall organization. So right away, there was this connection about well, my job matters. I know it matters because you just told me. And so that really built some loyalty right there for me with the organization. And then about 3/4 of the way on day 2, my direct manager came to pick me up, and all of us got picked up at the same time and went to our training departments where our workstations were already set up. I was introduced to team members. there was really an investment in getting to know me and expressing enthusiasm for me being there. People are, oh, we heard you were coming. We're so excited. We heard about this thing you said in your interview or this product you put out in the past, and we're really excited about seeing what you do here. So people sort of knew who I was and were excited to get to know me. And that really, again, built that instant connection with the team. And over the next couple of days, there was job shadowing and cross-functional introductions, purposeful meetings, and I felt set up for success. So by the end of that first week, I really felt like I was already being productive. I had ideas. I knew what I could do. I knew who I could reach out to for things. And that made a huge impact on me. And ultimately, I stayed there for over 6 years because from day one, I felt like they've got it together. And when things struggle, as companies do, I knew that on the other side, we would get back to that order and a plan. And so it made a huge difference.
Yeah, I love what you said about being like feeling productive because there's really no time to waste. Why sit there? I remember when I onboarded to one of my jobs, I was in a nice cubicle. It was like everything was beige. And I got this huge binder of process stuff to read through. And I think my manager was really just busy, right? Because managers are busy. They have a million things to do. So what can leaders do to prepare? You've mentioned a few things that was in your experience, but I'm thinking of the busy manager who may just say, oh, here's a binder for you. But when the person starts, and even if you want to go before that person starts, what are some steps they can take?
Yeah, for sure. I think even before the person comes on board, express your enthusiasm for them being on the team. And nowadays we have all these great tools like Loom. You can do a 15-second video and just send it and say, I'm so glad you accepted this offer. Here's what I think you're going to bring to the team. I'm excited to see you. If nothing else, just a personalized note, saying we're so excited about you joining the team, would be a great first start. And then internally, there are a lot of steps to onboarding, right? Like you have to make sure that you've got their equipment and their workstation and their security badge, and having all of those things in place through your onboarding process internally really builds a lot of confidence when they get there on day one and everything's been taken care of. If they have to come in and go, well, you can't actually use your computer yet. Wah, wah. You've already
You know
lost
how many
face.
times that has happened in either my career or somebody else's? Like their
Yep.
station's not set up. They can't log onto their computer. Like that is a normal thing. So it's like logistics need to be handled.
Yeah, and that all is on the company, right? Because that's a cross-functional process. So there needs to be checks and balances. And so you really need to have your team on the inside, your onboarding team, have a strategic plan together, and have those planning conversations. But as far as what the manager can do for their employee, again, building that relationship from day one. And then when they get there, being part of the orientation process, setting up time for this new hire to get to know their team and build those connections. Studies show that, employees who have a best friend at work are much less likely to be looking for a job elsewhere. That connection with someone at work really keeps them in their spot and drives engagement. So build those connections for them, help them find employee resource groups, help them get to know their team, those cross-functional projects, introduce them to the person and say what they're going to be working on together so they know where to start the conversation. And all that can be done in advance. You can have those meetings in their calendar to say, you're going to meet with this person. Here's your why. Here's the question you should ask them. Right. And that just helps that person get started right away. And yeah, you're going to still have that big book of procedures. For me, with my team, what I did is I had a Google Doc with hyperlinks. And so I would put that hyperlink of the thing I needed them to do, but next to it, the path of how to find it. So here's the share drive, here's the folder, here's the name of this document. But click here and you can see it right now. So that when they weren't in a meeting with someone else, they didn't sit and go, well, now what do I do? You work on this when you've got that downtime in between. So there's still that, I think, that value in that to an extent, but there needs to be more dynamics to it. You can't just be like, here's the book and see you next week.
Well, the same thing with the meeting, right? Because I remember going to go meet with someone. They're like, hey, you need to go meet with this person. And then she's looking at me like, hey, why are you here? And I'm looking at her like, I don't know. I love what you said about ask this question or start with this question, or here's how the project you would work on together, giving them something to go off because you don't know if you were landing in someone's office and they're like, hey, I have no background on you, right?
Yeah,
And it's just
100%.
awkward.
It is awkward. And then the next time you see them, you're like, sup?
How's it going?
Although you can bond in the awkwardness, I suppose.
You can if you have that kind of personality where you can
Right.
turn it into something funny. I think That's great.
Yeah.
Uh,
Another thing too to consider before someone comes on board is swag. I know some people, aren't huge fans of it, but I liken it to like a team wearing a jersey, right? You've got all your teammates wearing the jersey. Think back to high school on football game days, everybody wore their jersey to school and it just built up that momentum. And how is it different with swag, right? You want your folks to feel like a team that's working together, they're building up momentum and excitement. That's where that t-shirt and that sweatshirt can sort of come in. So studies have shown that those items can drive longevity with a team. And so I highly recommend too, as part of your new hire process, to consider adding some swag that's meaningful. So it doesn't need to be stickers that maybe nobody's going to use, something that actually is meaningful to a person, or even better, give them an option. Here's a menu of items, a jacket, a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, what works for you. So they get something that's meaningful to them and then will help them feel like they're part of that team and that culture right away.
yeah, it's always fun to get free stuff on the first day.
Mhm. Yep. Who needs another stress ball?
Exactly. Guy, we have kids, so you know the amount of crap they bring back, and you're like, no,
Yes.
please, no more of these little stress balls, no more of yes. Give me something I can use. Love it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So there's things that people can do, like the logistics piece that meet with their people. I love the Loom video to get people excited about coming in because there is so much anxiety and nervousness that first
Mhm.
day where you have no idea what's going on. So to be able
Mhm.
to have like, here's who I am, maybe here's what day one looks like, here's some people you're going to meet with, I think can relieve some of that uncertainty that any new hire is going to face.
Yeah, I've even done when we opened a new office in California, I went out and videoed the route, like pulling into the parking garage, walking from the parking garage down the steps into the office. And I did it, on a sped up basis, but I showed people like if you see this sign, you're in the right track. And if you walk past this building, you've gone too far. And just gave them that visual to help them find us in a congested business park where, it wasn't real clear where our office was on that second floor. And literally just made it so there was a visual guide. And nobody got lost. It worked.
I love that. Yeah, no, just thinking about because my kids just started school, right? Yours did too. And so Ben's starting middle school, and then they had like practice days where they could go in and see where their classes are, right? And see how to use their locker. And as adults, it's the same situation. You're walking into a totally new environment with
Hmm.
a new desk, new coworkers, new boss, but you
Hmm.
have none of that practice time. So I love that you put that video out just to, again, it's like, okay, it just relieves some of that uncertainty. It makes people go, okay,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
got
And
this.
I think it's also common for people to sort of assume that managers and higher leaders don't need that sort of assistance because, oh, they'll just jump right in day one. And they should be given that ramp up time too. And so those sort of universal tools that are just out there, that aren't signals sort of saying like, just you get this, I think helps too. So they don't feel like, oh, well, I'm a VP, I should know this. No, you're a person too. And so let's
Yeah.
have some universal tools available.
I love that idea. I'm even thinking about what you said is like, could, if a new leader's getting hired from the outside, could the team record a video, right? Like, hey, we're really happy to meet you. Like, looking
Mhm.
forward to have you as our leader.
Yeah,
I
I think that's
mean,
great.
like just to make, because yeah, people forget about the leaders, like,
Yeah,
especially the higher up they go, they're fine. And we think
yeah.
everyone's adults, but this can really just make it a good experience. Now, when you think about new hires, is there like a high risk time? Is it like the first 7 days, the first 5 days rather, or first month?
Honestly, I would say that like again, those first 90 days are critical, but really they're showing statistically it's the first 44. You have half that time to really make a long-term employee out of your team. Um, and those first 6 weeks go so fast. But I had an employee come to me one time in the office and they didn't report to me, but they said, I've been here for 4 days and my manager hasn't talked to me and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm just doing LinkedIn Learning. Is that okay? One, I don't know why you think I'm the authority figure. But yeah, if they're not reaching out to you, yes. Like
Oh, managers, if you're
do what you got to
listening,
do to
don't
fill your
do
time.
that.
Yeah. So obviously by the time the manager did circle around and have projects for this person, they were sort of already disengaged, right? Because they felt like they'd been brought in and why? It was a waste of everyone's time. There was no project waiting for them. Um, so it really does make a difference those first 44 days, especially to have a plan to set your team up for success, and to give them the resources they need to keep going forward and feel like they're going to make it to those 90 days and come out of that feeling like they know what they're doing. Now, I would argue that someone's a new hire for the first year, honestly. I would say it's a good idea to do a check-in at that 6 month mark, but really you haven't gone through your annual review process. You haven't gone through budgeting. You haven't gone through all those annual cycles until that year is complete. And so really you're still learning for the first year. And doesn't that make you new?
Oh, yeah. Doesn't seem to. I mean, but even after I moved to Vegas after 2 years, I was like, I'm new to Vegas. Like, it does feel like it's not your place yet until you've been there for a while. So I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that always got me when I was leading, and I had a large team, was like having processes in place for new hires. Because it was like, oh crap, new person's coming. Let me figure it out again. What do you recommend? And looking back, I was like, oh God, why didn't I have a process, right? Have some kind of something I could replicate for each new hire. So,
Mhm.
how do you suggest leaders go about, processes when they are onboarding, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I think, a checklist comes in handy, right? So there's things that you can do that are going to be universal truths. So this person needs to go through orientation. This person needs to go through their uh, compliance, harassment training and all of those sorts of things. And so some of that is taken care of by maybe your HR team or your onboarding team. But after that, what do you need them to do after that to get up and rolling? And that's where the hiring manager really needs to control that. But it can, again, be something that's repeated, right? So I need to set up team meetings. So on your checklist, you say team meetings. Now that team looks different every time because the new person is going to meet with who's there. And so that will always rotate, right? But you've got to set up those meetings. You need to set up, their resources. Make sure that you've checked to make sure that they've got all the computer programs and stuff that they're supposed to have. There's some universal truths with, that communication that, again, is going to be personalized for the person, but you need to send that pre first day communication. Your documents, as far as like your checklists and your expectations of your onboarding buddies, that sort of thing, like those can all be forms that are universal, but they are customizable so that they can be personalized. And you don't have to do all of this yourself, right? You've got a team that's going to work with this person and they want to connect with them too. So you as a manager are delegating tasks. Who wants to set up the one-on-ones for us? Who wants to do the first day lunch plan? Who wants to, share the welcome Slack? Like, it doesn't have to just be you because your whole team is bringing them in.
Mm-hmm.
And what better way to welcome them than to have the whole team part of the process?
Yeah, one of the things I finally figured out is I had someone on my team that was very process driven, wonderful, detailed human being. And so when someone came on board, it was like her project, right? She created that. She's like, okay, I'm going to train them in the specifics of the job, right? That I didn't need to do, and put together a manual for future use. And then there's a few people that would continue to update it. But yeah, like leverage your team.
Yeah.
Like be available for them, definitely. Start off with them. But then how can you get other team members excited about onboarding them?
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, they need to all work collaboratively once that person's there. So they should be introducing all of those processes collaboratively. And it's up to you as the manager, of course, to make sure no bad habits are developed, that sort of thing. So you may have to cherry pick who you're having teach processes.
Right. Exactly. Well, if you have an underperforming employee, that's a separate conversation, right? Definitely don't put them in charge of training your new hire.
But yeah, I think that, yeah, there's, I mean, it takes a village, literally, and any company is exactly that. There are cross collaborations and there's so many different pieces. So it's not all on you, but you as the hiring manager are the maestro putting the orchestra together for sure. But once you find something that works, exactly like your employee did, you create a process. Once it works, keep documentation of that and just rinse, rust, repeat. And when something doesn't work, adjust.
Right. And then you said, because the 44 days is like that. Okay. That's really when it always matters, but that's really the intense time. And then 45 days to a year, that's still important. But how often should leaders check in on new hires? Like, because you don't want to be that annoying. We talked about this in our meeting. Hey, you doing all right? You doing all right? You don't want to feel like you're a micromanager, but you also don't want to ghost them. So what's the right check-in sequence, knowing that it's going to be different for every person, right?
Yeah, I think we all sort of have that sort of feeling when you hire someone new that like, oh, it's more work to get them up and running than it is to do it myself. There's sort of those moments on occasion. And I feel that as a mom all the time too. But the truth is you're investing that time now to save the time later. And so I would say that first week, honestly, plan a half hour a day to check in. Now, they may only need 5 minutes of your time. They may need that full half hour to say, I don't understand this. Can you help me find it? Whatever that is. But that first week, I would not worry about being annoying. Be annoying.
Week one, be annoying. That's your task.
Yes, be annoying.
Well, even
And then, as they
that
get more comfortable, and this, of course, will depend on the person too and how comfortable they seem to feel from the get-go. But I would say, maybe 1 to 2 times, probably 2 times a week, maybe the second and third week, I would do like a one-on-one. And then you could maybe do weekly one-on-ones through that first 45 days and move to bi-weekly after those 45 days are over, depending on the comfort level of the person. Because they want to just sit and do their job and not feel micromanaged. But in the beginning, they need a lot of support and they have a lot of questions. And even if they don't have a question, knowing they have the opportunity to ask and that empowerment is there has an immense value as well. Again, going back to my story about the person with 4 days and the manager hadn't even talked to them, like, clearly they're not a priority on their manager's calendar. And so that relationship is already strained. But if he had had a daily one-on-one with that manager and said, hey, I don't know what to do today, like, boom, instant change. And would have been, again, feeling that productiveness right away and knowing what to do with themselves. And I think there's also value if you have an organization where you're bringing in multiple employees on orientation days to make that a cohort. And those people get together maybe at day 90, day 120, day 180, and you just say, like, how are things going from your point of view? Get feedback on that onboarding practice so you can fine tune it. Get feedback on the overall culture, resources, maybe anything they felt was misconstrued. Maybe they have questions on benefits and when those kick in, those sorts of things. But get them together and have them build that bond as the class of could have immense value as well. Even if you're doing the class of Q1 of 24, the class of Q2 24, building that sort of camaraderie will help to build those relationships and that longevity in your team as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something just popped up for me is like thinking about, I know that leaders sometimes have jobs where they have client meetings or they have like a business trip or they have something where they're actually not on site that first week. Like, shit happens, right?
Sure.
You're not there the first day. So that may happen. And if it does, what can a leader do? Is it more of a call? Hey, look, this is a scheduling mistake. It happened maybe before. This is out of my control. What would a leader do in that situation?
I mean, delegate, right? Like, you've got to have someone else in the organization that you would trust enough to say, I again would reach out prior to day one and do an email saying, hey, here is the situation. I'm so excited to have you on board. Unfortunately, I can't be there that week due to a business conflict. But what I have set in place is that my colleague X is going to walk you through these processes. You're going to meet with these people. And when we get together on next Monday, when I'm back in the office, I'm really excited to hear what you've learned, what questions you might have to provide you that support. And I've set up a longer one-on-one for us that day. We've got an hour and a half over lunch that I'd love to just get your feedback and help you move forward from here. But again, if you've got teams you need to delegate, like, that's what those teams are there to do. And you set them up with that expectation from the get-go of, I understand the situation. I've set you up for success anyway, and I'm going to circle back. And so I think that that's really the best step forward.
Yeah, I like that. Just telling them, hey, giving them the heads up so they're not surprised. Oh, whoops, manager's not here. And then having a plan for when they get back into the office, because it's just going to happen. But if possible, getting some blocking those 30 minutes at the end of the day or whenever during the day to have for that person that you hire to ask any questions that they need.
Yeah. Now, even encourage them, keep a list. There'll be a lot. Keep a list. Bring it to me.
Yes, bring me a list of questions. So if a leader's listening and they're like, oh my God, that's a lot of work. I can't even imagine doing everything Carolyn's asking me to do as a leader. If you had to boil it down to one thing, so if you had to complete the sentence, if leaders did nothing else for a new hire, they should do this one thing, what would that be?
Build connections. They should focus on connecting the new hire with their team, with their project partners, their cross collaborators, because that's where you're going to find out what you're doing, what your resources are. So you have someone to go ask questions to. You need to work on building connections. People are much more likely to stay when they're feeling appreciated at work, when they feel connected at work, when they feel like they have friends at work. And so building connections is probably the most important thing you need to do.
Well, that's great advice because no one wants to. I mean, you don't go to work to be by yourself. Maybe some people do. I don't know. I'm just, but
But
that's
even
part
if you
of
want to be
work.
by yourself, you still need to know where to go when you have a question.
Yeah, you still need it to. You need other people
Yeah.
to work with. It's a company, right? It's not a company of one. So I think that's great advice. Now,
Yeah.
Carolyn, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you didn't have a chance to say that you want to leave listeners with?
It's not that you didn't ask, but I do want to say that I think it's really important to listen to Brene Brown here and say to be unclear is to be unkind, right? If you aren't telling people the expectation, you aren't giving them the tools to reach those expectations, you aren't setting smart goals for them, you're setting them up to fail, and that's unkind. So be specific, be clear, and be available.
And make sure the smart goals you're giving them match the ones that are in the system.
Yes. Yes. Ideally, one set of SMART goals would be great.
It's always prefer. Well, Carolyn, where can people find out more about you?
You can easily find me on LinkedIn if you can spell my weird last name.
I will link it up in the show notes because yes, it's a trippy one.
And also I'm launching Curate EX, which is a new website and ability to help growing businesses drive the employee experience for them. So curateex.com. You can find me there.
All right. I'll also link that up in the show notes. But Carolyn, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Growing Through It. I'm Jen Arnold, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If today's story sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast, leave a review, and share it with your fellow leaders. And remember, each episode comes with a nugget of wisdom that we expand on in our newsletter. So if you're eager to put these insights into action, head over to our website at growthsignals.co and sign up for exclusive content that'll give you an edge in your leadership journey. Keep growing, and I'll connect with you again soon in our next episode. Until then, take the lessons learned and lead authentically.